All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we are stepping into a world of magic and vampires and just a touch of romance with Six Scorched Roses, which is a fantasy romance novella by Carissa Broadbent. Now, we have got the Amazon book description and some really intriguing reader reviews, so we're basically giving you a sneak peek before you even open the book. Our mission, to uncover what makes this novella tick and why it has readers buzzing. And trust me, it's a wild ride.
I bet.
We're talking about a dying protagonist, a mysterious illness, and a bargain with a vampire. All set against the backdrop of a village cursed by the gods themselves.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. It sounds like a really fascinating premise that immediately sets up some pretty compelling questions. For instance, how much agency does Lilith actually have in this whole situation? She's battling a deadly illness. Her village is, like on the brink of collapse. And she's forced to make this deal with a creature who's really known for taking, not giving.
Right.
It's kind of a recipe for high-stakes drama.
Absolutely. And the description doesn't shy away from the danger at all. It uses phrases like, dark romantic tales with bite, which honestly makes me want to dive in head first. But there's also this undercurrent of tragedy and sacrifice, which is highlighted in the reader reviews. Many are comparing it to classic tales of forbidden love, like Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a really interesting parallel, actually. The Beauty and the Beast comparison is especially interesting to me because it suggests that there's more to Vale, the vampire, than meets the eye, right? Like, is he truly a monster, or is there like this hidden gentleness, beneath his kind of fearsome exterior? And then what will Lilith actually discover as she gets to know him better? The reader reviews seem to point to this very complex, multi-layered romance that goes beyond just the initial attraction.
Right. It seems like the author, Carissa Broadbent, is playing with our expectations a little bit here. She's giving us a kind of familiar trope, the bargain with a supernatural being, but then she's twisting it in a way that feels fresh and unpredictable. And I'm especially intrigued by this world where science, magic, and gods, coexist. It's not your typical fantasy setting. What are your initial thoughts on this, knowing Broadbent's larger Crowns of Nyaxia world?
Well, I think the coexistence of science, magic, and gods, it immediately raises some questions about the power dynamics in this world. From what we know of the Crowns of Nyaxia series, the gods aren't exactly benevolent. They interfere in the mortal realm, often with really devastating consequences.
Yeah.
So the idea of a god-cursed village is especially chilling. Is this illness like a natural phenomenon, or is it like a deliberate punishment from the gods?
Ooh, good question.
And how does the presence of vampires, like beings who exist outside of the natural order, how do they complicate this already volatile situation? I feel like there's a sense that Lilith is caught in a web spun by forces that are far beyond her control, which adds like a layer of cosmic horror to the romance.
That's a fantastic point. It's like Lilith is playing a game where she doesn't even know all the rules. And speaking of Lilith, one thing that really jumps out from the reviews is the praise for her character. Readers are describing her as strong, capable, and determined, not your typical damsel in distress.
Right, and that's incredibly refreshing, especially in a genre that sometimes relies on really stereotypical female characters. Lilith's agency is constantly being tested. She's making these really difficult choices, even when those choices come with a hefty price. It makes her struggles feel so much more relatable and her triumphs all the more meaningful.
Agreed. And it seems like Broadbent hasn't sacrificed character development just for the sake of a fast-paced plot. Readers are consistently praising the depth of both Lilith and Vale, which is impressive for a novella. There's a sense that even though this is a shorter work, it's packed with emotional nuance.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about the reader responses. They're highlighting the novella's ability to feel like a complete story despite its length. They specifically call out the pacing and the character development as being particularly strong, which is a real testament to Broadbent's skill as a writer. It seems like she's managed to create a world that feels really expansive and characters that feel fully realized, all within the confines of a shorter format.
And that brings us to a really interesting point. We've talked about the dangerous romance, the god-cursed village, and the complex world building. But what about the writing itself? What are readers saying about Broadbent's style and how she brings this story to life?
Well, one of the words that keeps popping up in the reviews is engrossing. Readers are praising Broadbent's ability to, draw them into the story and keep them hooked until the very last page. And when you look closely at the Amazon description, you can see how she achieves this. She uses really vivid imagery and evocative language to create a truly immersive reading experience. For example, she describes the village as being shrouded in a perpetual twilight, which instantly conjures up a sense of mystery and foreboding.
Oh, I love that. It's like you can practically feel the shadows closing in.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if the village is literally and figuratively shrouded in darkness. What does that actually say about Lilith's journey? Is she fighting to, bring light back into her world, both literally and metaphorically?
That's a great question, and I think it speaks to the deeper symbolism that's going on here. Lilith's illness could be seen as a manifestation of the village's curse, a physical representation of the darkness that's consuming, them all. Her bargain with Vale then becomes more than just this desperate attempt to survive, right? It's like a symbolic act of defiance against the forces that are trying to destroy her and her people.
Yeah, I'm also really struck by the way readers are describing the romance between Lilith and Vale. It's not just about the physical attraction or the forbidden love trope. There's a real sense of emotional depth and complexity to their relationship.
Right. And that complexity is really evident in the reviews. They're not just, gushing about the steamy scenes. They're talking about the way Broadbent captures the nuances of their connection. They're drawn to the vulnerability that Lilith and Vale show each other, the way they challenge and support one another, and the slow burn of their relationship as they kind of navigate this dangerous world together.
And it's interesting because while the novella seems to be a standalone story, it's still set within this larger Crowns of Nyaxia world. Do you think readers who are new to this series will be able to follow along? Or are there essential details from the previous books that might get lost?
From what I've gathered from the reviews, Six Scorched Roses can absolutely be enjoyed as a standalone story. Broadbent does a fantastic job of providing enough context for new readers to understand the world and the stakes without, bogging them down in excessive exposition. However, for those who have read the Crowns of Nyaxia series, there are definitely some Easter eggs and deeper connections to be found.
So it's like a reward for the loyal fans.
Yeah.
A little wing to those who've been following the series from the beginning.
Exactly. And it's a clever way to entice new readers to explore the wider world. It's like Broadbent is saying, hey, here's a taste of what this universe has to offer. If you like what you see, there's a whole feast waiting for you.
I love that analogy. It's like a gateway drug to the Crowns of Nyaxia series. And speaking of gateways, let's talk about the novella's format. It's a shorter read than a full-length novel, which might appeal to readers who are, looking for a quick escape or a bite-sized dose of fantasy romance. Do the reviews indicate if it feels complete or rushed in any way?
That's a great question, and one that I think a lot of readers have when they're, considering a novella. But what's fascinating is that the reviews, consistently praise the novella's pacing. They say that despite its shorter length, Six Scorched Roses feels like a complete and satisfying story. Broadbent doesn't waste a single word. Every scene, every interaction, every line of dialogue, it all serves a purpose, propelling the narrative forward and deepening our understanding of the characters and their world.
So it's like a perfectly crafted miniature, capturing all the intricate details of a larger world in a more compact form.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that sometimes less is more, A shorter format can actually enhance a story's impact by forcing the author to be more economical with their words and focus on the really essential elements. In this case, it seems like Broadbent has used the novella format to her advantage, creating a really tightly woven tale that's both emotionally resonant and narratively satisfying.
And it sounds like that emotional resonance is a big part of what's drawing readers in. The reviews are filled with words like heartbreaking, beautiful, and unforgettable. It seems like this is a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading.
Absolutely. And that speaks to the power of well-crafted romance. It's not just about the happily ever after. It's about the journey, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the moments of profound connection that make us feel, truly alive. And in Six Scorched Roses, it seems like Broadbent has really captured the essence of what makes romance so compelling. The longing, the heartbreak, the hope, and the enduring power of love in the face of darkness.
Yeah, it sounds like Six Scorched Roses offers a truly immersive experience, one that engages your mind and your heart. It's got this intriguing blend of fantasy and romance and almost gothic horror elements, but it's not just about escaping into this fantastical world. It's about connecting with characters who are, facing these impossible choices and grappling with these complex emotions.
And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding, I think. We're not just scratching the surface, We're peeling back the layers, exploring the symbolism, and considering the broader implications of Lilith's choices. For example, the idea of a bargain with a vampire raises all sorts of questions about power and consent and the nature of sacrifice. Is Lilith really free to choose her fate when her village's survival is hanging in the balance?
Right, that's such a good point. It makes us think about the compromises we might make under duress and the potential consequences of those decisions. And it makes me wonder if the god-cursed illness is somehow connected to the vampire's existence. Could their presence be seen as like a disruption of the natural order, a transgression that has angered the gods?
That's a fascinating theory. It speaks to the potential for conflict between different factions in this world, the gods, the vampires, and the mortals caught in the middle. And it raises the question of whether Lilith's bargain with Vale will ultimately bring salvation or, further chaos.
Okay, so if you're listening to this and you are hooked on this blend of romance, fantasy, and maybe even a touch of horror, what would you say is the one thing listeners should keep in mind as they pick up Six Scorched Roses? What's the key to unlocking the heart of this story?
I think the key is to approach this novella with an open mind and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. Don't let the familiar tropes fool you. Broadbent is subverting expectations, and she's crafting a story that's both deeply personal and epic in scope. Pay attention to the symbolism, the nuances of the characters' relationships, and the way that the world itself reflects the emotional turmoil of the characters.
So it's not just about reading the words on the page, it's about experiencing the story on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to be swept away by the emotions, the atmosphere, and the sheer imaginative power of Broadbent's writing.
Exactly. And that's what makes Six Scorched Roses such a captivating read. It's a story that will stay with you long after you finish the last page, prompting you to reflect on the nature of love, sacrifice, and the choices we make when we're faced with the impossible.
So if you are looking for a richly imagined fantasy world, a compelling romance with complex characters, and a story that will, challenge your assumptions and stay with you long after you've turned the final page, then Six Scorched Roses is definitely worth a deep dive.
So go forth, dear listener, and explore the world of Crowns of Nyaxia for yourself. And as you journey alongside Lilith and Vale, ask yourself this. If you were in their shoes, faced with a similar bargain, what would you choose? What price would you be willing to pay for love, for survival, for hope? Happy reading.